Hey, and welcome to Matt and Jess TV. I am Matt Rose.
And I'm Jessica Bun Bun.
Welcome to our reaction and review for Nine Bodies in a Mexican Morgue, Episode 5. The biggest twist, perhaps, of the entire season. The ending that I am still struggling to figure out in my brain. What was that?
Okay, everybody put on your tinfoil hats nice and
Oh
early
boy.
here.
Okay.
Okay. The person that was face down, that was Kevin in the Barracuda pond, is not Kevin. I think that Kevin is still alive. I think that he switched clothes, probably with Dan, who's, kind of similar build, brown hair, had his face eaten off, so they couldn't actually identify him, but had the same clothes on, so it was enough of an identifier for Sonia and Zach to be like, oh, this must be Kevin. So I think that Kevin is still out there. The bigger question is Kevin actually the killer, or is there another person out there? And for me, if Kevin is going to switch bodies and that's actually Dan and Kevin is still out there, then it's Kevin.
100%. Okay, first and foremost, you need to do a victory lap here because you were on it with the Barracuda Pond really, really early.
I needed to see somebody in that Barracuda pond, and they did it beautifully. I really love this show. It's been so fun.
It's been really, really fun. No, it's true. I think something that we both have craved from this show is complete and total absurdity when it comes to either how people die or how their
Yes.
bodies are found.
Yes.
And if you're going to have something like this, you have to pay it off. And they've kind of done a good job for the most part with taking people out. Like, we weren't the biggest fans of what they did with Lisa, but here they paid some of it off. They paid some of it off with just like the interesting emotional way in which they took out Amy and Dan, something that was a little bit different. But yeah, we're going to talk more about this whole did Kevin swap bodies. We'll talk more in full about some of these victims, how they all get out of this situation alive, who is actually still alive. Before we do, though, be sure to hit that subscribe button because I know we're starting to wind down here on Nine Bodies in a Mexican Morgue, but there is so much content coming. Like, we're still in the midst of the White Lotus and Yellow Jackets, and coming up very, very soon, we have both The Last of Us and also The Handmaid's Tale, and we don't want you guys to miss any of that, and subscribing is a great way to stay on top of all things here at the channel.
Also, if you are interested in our video reviews of The Pit and Bosch Legacy, we are covering that right now exclusively over on our Patreon. We will leave a link for you below. Not only do you get those videos, but it also helps support Matt and I here at the channel. So thank you so much to everyone who has joined.
Thank you guys. We really, really appreciate that.
Okay, so beginning of this episode, all of us sleuths out there figured that it was Sonia that went and let Zach go. We all saw the watch and, it ended up being her. And for the reasons I think a lot of us felt that it would be. I don't think anybody thought that that person was going there to kill Zach. I mean, why leave it on a cliffhanger if you're just going to kill him in the next episode?
No, that's just not this show's vibe. Like, they have no problem taking people out in the middle of an episode. This is not a 20-season show here where we're so invested in these characters that we're going to be sitting around freaking out about the prospect of, how dare you kill Zach, even though we know that almost everyone on this show dies.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest L that I am taking on this one is I legitimately thought that because we were getting Zach backstory away from what's going on here, his family is the only people that we have seen away from the show, that I was like, oh, well, Zach has to make it out, right? No, this show not letting me have a W on that one.
Listen, I thought he was going to be okay for a really, really long time. Even after, what happened with him and Kevin, he was still like limping his way around the jungle. I was like, okay, maybe he's going to figure it out. And then at the end of this, we see him and Sonia, they're up there, but then like the fog is getting really heavy, and at that point I was just like, oh no, nothing good happens in a show like this in the fog.
No. So after Zach is released and it's kind of like, we'll just say that you got away kind of thing, everybody decides to split up, which is Never a good thing. It's not a good thing in horror movies,
No.
murder mysteries, anything like that. Once you split up, people be getting got at that point. This is exactly what ends up happening to poor Dan and Amy. A very touching scene. You're right about that. It
Yeah.
was when I saw her with her head on his shoulder. I'm like, is she sleeping? Is kind of what it felt like, where he was giving this last moment monologue confession to her to be like, listen, this is how it started, but man, I really love you. I really fell for you. And then when they kind of come back around and show that they are both dead, that they have been stabbed multiple times, I was like, oh, this show keeps getting me in different ways that I really didn't expect. And we've been covering TV for a very long time, 13
Yeah.
years here and away from the channel. And it's just when a show actually surprises me, it's just so refreshing.
Well, I think the biggest thing for me was I never expected that I would believe Dan when he gives a speech like that, because we've seen this time and time again on other shows too. This idea of, oh, it started as this other plot that I was scheming to try to get more money, power, whatever.
Mhm.
Insert your various idea here, but now the feelings are legitimate, and I'm usually really, really cynical with this stuff, where I'm just sitting back and thinking, sure, sure, Jan. But here I'm like, okay, Dan, like I actually kind of did believe it. Though, I mean, at the same time, I also should have known that at that very second, this was the end of both of them, because it's just, you're clearly, there's not two people who survive, and you guys are never going to split up from each other.
No, I think we both felt like they were probably going to get killed together, and they did, but they did such a cool reveal on the fact that they were already dead when this was happening, that, Amy was already gone, Dan was dying, that they were killed together, but it had originally felt like he was just coming clean with everything, that he really did want to have a fresh start if they got out of there. It was a very cool reveal.
It was a really cool reveal, and it's also one that you have to sort of play back and be like, okay, however this happened, they could not have seen it coming because they were both still in that position. I don't get the sense that they were just like, stabbed somewhere else and then they were like wandered and got back over there. It felt like this was something that happened pretty quietly, but then when it happened, it was basically everything all at once, because you look at the number of wounds that each one of them had in their back, and it was a lot.
Yeah, this was not just a couple of stabs.
Yeah.
This was definitely a lot. They want whoever killed them,
Yeah.
Kevin, made sure that they were absolutely dead. Now, when we finally have our last three and they're all pointing guns and like, what are we doing
Yeah.
here? Kevin is like, I'm not going with you guys. I'm not okay with what is going on. I don't trust you guys. Him and Zach obviously have a, a bad history at this point. It just feels like there's no one else it could be but Kevin. And it felt like that from the last episode when he was pulling off Zach's toenails. It takes a very special person to be able to have that kind of constitution to be able to do something like that. Sort of compared it to Lost with Saeed. That was his job away from the island. So when it was time to actually do that kind of stuff on the island, he was the only person that was really able to stomach doing something like this, because he was already doing something like this. To be able to do something so terrible to somebody, you have to have done that before.
Yeah, it was a big clue, and there's been some pretty big clues. And even in this episode, we see more directly what's going on with Sonia and Zach, as though the show is trying to be like, look, these two, they're not bad, they're innocent. But then you just have Kevin, and the way that
Yes.
Kevin kind of wanders into this scene, it's kind of, it gives you this feeling of, okay, you might have been out there for a while, and yeah, you guys can all recreate the three Spider-Men pointing at each other for as long as you want, but at the same time, there's still a mystery with Kevin. There's still a functionality as to how somebody who has been in the medical device field / doctor field, it does not feel like this guy is really that rough and tumble that he's going to be able to be one of the lone survivors at this point, unless he has some sort of really checkered history. Like, it's all lining up.
Yeah, and I really feel like the reveal is going to be what you said in a past video, which is just we've heard Kevin's story that,
Yeah.
he lost his practice, he got sued, he's so heavily in debt that he ends up getting mixed in with Cora, with the drugs, with everything that's happening because he just can't afford what is going on. He can't really work anymore in the field that he knows how to work in. He can't really find a way to get the money to get his life back on track. So he turns to this, and that he may have been doing this type of work for Cora for a while now.
Okay, let's now just get more into this just really crazy, but also very much plausible in the most likely scenario of Kevin faking his own death. Because I tried to think a lot about this because we see to a certain extent, who the person in the mask is at the end of the episode, and it feels like they do sort of fit Kevin's profile.
And Sonya recognizes them. So it's
Yeah,
somebody from the plane.
it's clearly somebody from the plane. I tried, especially because of that mask. I was sitting back being like, okay, could it be Carlos? But then the more I thought about it, it's like, okay, we know what happened to Carlos. It feels like everybody knows what happened to Carlos. And while they showed Carlos running around and he's very athletic, he could get from point A to B pretty fast, the idea of him going and then him being able to hide his death and all of this in this amount of time, it just doesn't feel realistic. Whereas with Kevin, like you said, there's the body in the Barracuda pond. He could have easily switched things out. And because everything was so frantic at that point with Sonya and with Zach, it's not like either one of them took a lot of time to really analyze anything.
No, and they weren't really going to be able to figure too much out unless they went back and checked Dan to see if Dan was actually missing, because that's who I think it is. I think that Kevin has switched clothes with Dan,
Mhm.
similar build, similar hair, just put him face down in the Barracuda pond and hoped that they wouldn't dig into it deeper. And they didn't. I mean, Zach is a DEA agent. He could have dug into it a bit deeper, but I think they're in a frantic, weird situation fighting for their lives. I don't think it's the time to be like, let's put on our DA detective hat
Yeah.
and let's go check that this isn't like the switcheroo.
Well, and this is where, I don't want to give Kevin too much credit because he's done a lot of horrible things, but let's just talk through the intelligence of this plan here for a moment, in that he didn't necessarily have to rush the early part of this, because basically what he did was, you hear the gunfire, and there's like a signal, oh no, something really, really bad has happened. But he can sort of dictate when that happens and when people are rushing towards it. So he can be very, very prepared. Because they hear that, they think, okay, something must have happened. He must have gone. But because they also hear that, they're very much of this mindset of, oh, it could be us next. And so that immediately instills this sense of urgency, but he could plan to make sure that he is not ready to kick off his next stage until they get to this point where he's just like, okay, I'm good to go. I'm good to handle whatever comes
Yeah.
up next.
Okay, my wonder with Sonya and Zach at this point though was, okay, they made Kevin throw his gun in the Barracuda pond. Okay,
Yeah.
so that gun is gone.
Yeah.
They have the only other gun. They've heard a gunshot. There wasn't that much real talk about who has a gun at this point. Like going down, seeing that Kevin is dead or whatever. Okay, they're like, well, then he must have been shot. So there must be another person out here. And I understand, if it's Kevin taking off the mask at the end and being like, well, it doesn't matter anymore because everybody's going to be dead. I've done what I need to get done. But why bother to give her any sort of satisfaction before she's going to go anyways to let her know who it is?
Yeah, that's sort of the sociopathic part of this, where it's sort of, you don't have to do this, but
Right.
for whatever reason, because it's maybe what you said, that he's finished the job in some ways,
Yep.
maybe he just feels like, okay, you know what? I can do this now in a way that I didn't have to do this earlier. I can have my little moment in the sun, and then I will be rescued, and then I will go off and do whatever other horrible things I have planned for the future.
Okay, so could it be somebody else? Is it possible that it's Carlos, sort of brown hair, put him in the clothes? I just feel like too many days have passed.
Yeah.
And because of decomposition in this type of an environment where it's very hot, it's very humid, his body probably would have decomposed pretty quickly, would have been smelling definitely at this point. So I feel like he wouldn't have been able to use another body that's been out there for a while. Like, I don't think Kevin would have used Carlos's body. I feel like it has to be Dan's body. But like the way that Carlos was found, I feel like they know that it's him. Like, because he was stabbed. Like,
Yeah.
how are you faking that in the jungle?
I
He
don't.
would have had to have actually stabbed himself to make it look like he was gone. That sort of like the end of Scream to spoil that, where, you know, they're like, oh, well, we can't look like we weren't victims, so we're going to stab each other.
Yeah, I feel
It's not, I don't think it's it.
I'm like 99% sure it's not him. I mean, I'll leave that 1% open because the show is really crazy and maybe they're going to find some way to pull it off. But it's just for all the reasons that you've already spelled out. It just feels really, really difficult. And like we've sort of talked about, the way in which Kevin died is much more of the ultimate perfect crime that he can use in order to hide himself. The idea of pretending or taking out yourself by stabbing yourself, it's just there's so many different ways that that can go wrong. It's plus all of the time you have to spend out there. It's just so much harder.
Yeah, it feels like there's only really one person, and that it's Kevin, and that he couldn't have used Carlos's body because Carlos's body is just too decomposed.
Yeah.
So he's used Dan's body. And I just don't think there's too many risks for it to be Carlos to do, you know, stab himself, leave himself out in the jungle for people to find, because then he'd have to be laying there for who knows how long, hoping somebody comes across him.
Okay, the only other idea here, and you mentioned this at the start of the video, is just like, okay, could there be somebody else out there? And
Right.
theoretically, the answer is yes. For the sake of this show, and for the sake of our satisfaction as viewers of Nine Bodies in a Mexican Morgue, there better not be somebody else out there, because that is going to be such a cop-out, so disappointing, and I just want to think that the show is smarter than that. Unless they have the greatest twist explanation of all time that's going to blow my mind, I just feel like it will be a letdown.
I agree. I do not want to just have random person in the jungle that we just didn't know was there reporting in Decorah. I just don't want to see that. It will be such a letdown for me.
The thing that I'm more hopeful about, if we're going to go completely out of left field here, is this idea that's like, okay, maybe Sonya can still find a way to survive, question mark. Like,
No.
it's not looking good right now, but could there still be some sort of twist when it comes to the actual plot here?
Yeah, no, I think they're both dead.
I want to believe Sonya, zombie Sonya, can you save the day?
Yeah, I would like to believe that maybe she would still be there, but there's no way he's going to unmask himself as Kevin, probably.
No.
And then somehow he's got to be sure that she's done.
I think the reality here is, and I'm saying this mostly just as somebody who wants to see, like, quote unquote, the good guys win. It's just that the good guys in this case may just come in the form of Zach's wife, Claire, who we
Yes.
know is in the midst of trying to figure everything out. She's on her way down there. They're not making it altogether easy on her, which is a part of the problem.
Yeah, no, it's not going to be easy for her to get there. I think she will be able to get there, but no happy ending there. There seems to be like there's not really going to be a happy ending at all with this. I was really hopeful that we were going to have that Zach
Yeah.
Claire connection at the end, but unless he's fallen off that cliff and is hanging on maybe some way, we didn't see his body, so I mean, no body, no death.
Well, that's the thing.
Come on, Zach.
When I was thinking about Sonya, I was just sitting here being like, okay, there's got to be a way somebody's going to survive. And because, you know, she was still breathing in the final second, but it is true what you're saying, that he's not going to leave her alive. But yeah, we don't actually know where Zach is. Maybe Zach is still our one last clinging to hope person here.
I really hope that he is, that, you know, we saw the killer kind of look over the side to see if the body was there. No, but it's a good enough fall. So, you know, he's probably dead. I feel like tinfoil hat that Zach is holding on to the side of that cliff and he's going to pull himself back up and he is going to be reunited and he's going to take out Kevin. It has been Kevin versus Zach for so much of this show. And after what Kevin did to his toe, come on, Zach, you got to be holding on for life.
You're pretty jacked. Like, you can be able to, like, hold on to those rocks for a little while.
Yeah.
Listen, I would be very, very satisfied with that. I feel like at this point, barring some unforeseen twist or something that we've already talked about, which would be an Olympic disappointment, and I think the writing is smarter than that. I
Yeah.
think that this show is going to stick the landing in a way that maybe not everybody likes it, but I think it's going to have a thought out ending that's like, okay, we really planned this from the start and we wanted to do something crazy, and hopefully you're on board with it.
Yeah, it's going to stick the landing better than Octavio stuck his landing.
Oh, what you slandering Octavio beyond the grave.
Correct.
Okay, no, it's really just, this is a really fun show. It's been a great ride. I think that this episode was so good at sort of finding yet another way to instill a twist in a way that I didn't even expect.
Yeah.
But that's where we are with 9 Bodies in a Mexican Morgue, episode 5. So let us know, do you think this is Kevin? Did Kevin fake his own death? Is this where we're going? Let us know. Hit that subscribe button, support us further. Join our Patreon. That link is in the description. We are covering there exclusively in video form, The Pit, as well as Bosch Legacy. Thank you guys. We'll see you here next time.